We learn as much as you do from this, so this is a fantastic opportunity for us. Today, what I'd like to do, we only have 20 minutes, so I'm going to give a brief overview of who Aldebaran is and the Altar project, a very exciting major copper gold project that we're drilling out in San Juan province in Argentina right now. A little bit about copper. I won't have time to go into all the details, so I strongly encourage you, those who haven't already stopped by, to stop by our booth afterwards and talk to our team. We are traded on the TSXV, so the appropriate disclaimers apply to us as we move forward. I'm an exploration geologist too, so I will be making forward-looking statements as we discuss things. There are 4 key points I'd like to have you take away from this brief presentation. One is Aldebaran, with the Altar project, we're advancing one of the largest undeveloped copper deposits in the hands of a junior company right now. We have an option to earn an 80% interest in the Altar project. It's a project that already has a resource of approximately 13 billion pounds of copper and nearly 4 million ounces of gold. So it meets the threshold of size to be of interest to any major mining company, any major copper mining company right now. But the second point is it's about to get very much larger. It's a large deposit already, and it's about to get quite a bit larger, and we'll spend some time discussing recent results that we've put out that we're very excited about and what we anticipate will be coming up in the next field season. The third point is that we're really in an emerging hotbed for copper exploration. We're located in the San Juan province in Argentina. It's an area that is one of the most active areas for porphyry copper exploration in the world right at this moment. Argentina has not been known as a mining country historically, and as a consequence, they've sat on very good projects and opportunities, both in the mining space, copper and lithium, as well as in the oil and gas space. And they're realizing the potential to allow the development, allow the foreign investment necessary for those projects to be developed. It's the same rocks as are across the border in Chile. And so there's every reason to expect there are large copper deposits here. They just have, the conditions haven't been right for those to be developed, and that's changing right now. And finally, the fourth point that I'd like to have you take away from today is we're the right team to be on this project right now. We're a group of seasoned exploration geologists who are specialists in finding these types of projects, drilling these out, and delivering them to majors. Our first company under our same management team made the discovery of the Kira deposit in southern Peru, and we sold that project for $650 million to First Quantum. So we have executed the business plan that I'll lay out today successfully once, and we think we're well on our way and positioned to do it again. In addition to this, we have some very good strategic partners. We're earning into this project from Sibanye-Stillwater. We have a large fund out of San Francisco called Route 1 that is a strong financial backer for all of our projects moving forward and provides us good support. And most recently, South 32 came in as a strategic 9.9% party into it. So that's important to us because it's access to capital with less dilution for our existing shareholders, but it's also a strong technical endorsement on the project. I thought I'd also open by just saying a few words about why copper. Why are we so excited about having our hands on a very large copper deposit like this? And I think everyone's aware of the goals that have been set for electrification and reducing carbon use in the world moving forward. We can debate about if that's necessary or not, but the reality is it's already started. And we're seeing that in all types of aspects of our lives moving forward. And I think one of the real shocking statistics for me, or eye-opening statistics for me, is the projection we have in the graph on this diagram that indicates that in the next 22 years, we will need as much copper as we've consumed throughout history until today. Let that sink home for a little bit. All the copper that's been produced and mined to date will need that much again in the next 22 years. Now, maybe we won't meet all of those goals, and those goals will change as we go forward, but if we only need half of that projection, it will be an immense challenge for our industry to meet that objective. It's almost impossible, quite frankly. And however, it's clear that the demand will be increasing notably, and it'll be a fantastic time to be delivering a project like we have. We interact with many of the major mining companies, and they're already showing, I would almost say, desperation to put their hands on major copper projects. They need these. They know how long it takes to get them into development, and I couldn't be more pleased than to be delivering this type of a project into that type of an environment moving forward. So just a few words about our strategy and what type of a company we are and how we work. Aldebaran is actually the third company of 3 that we've had in our same management team. Our first company was called Antares Minerals. From that, we spun out Regulus Resources, a sister company we have that's working on a very exciting copper gold project in northern Peru right now. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about that one. And then Aldebaran spun out from that, and we're focused on the Altar copper project. With all 3 companies, our strategy has been leveraging on our experience as exploration geologists. I'm an exploration geologist. I did my undergraduate and graduate degrees with Mark Anauti, one of the world's best porphyry copper skarn specialists at Stanford University. From that, I worked with major mining companies in the first half of my career. And from that, I jumped into the junior space because I felt it would be easier to work more agile. I do the same thing in the junior space that we did for the majors. It's just we do it for you as investors and ourselves as investors in our own ideas and company moving forward. And what we do is we leverage off of that experience and our knowledge, particularly the South American Cordillera, which is one of the best places to be looking for copper deposits, to identify projects that have potential to be extremely large copper or copper gold deposits, the type of a project that's the size of project and quality of project that a major mining company would like to acquire. We intentionally don't look for small gold deposits or small copper deposits because the likelihood then is that you have to put it into production yourself. 1, you don't want our team building a mine, that's not our specialty. And 2, it takes a long time to do that and a lot of capital. We try to focus our efforts on that steep part of the Lassonde curve between discovery and pre-feasibility when a lot of value is added. So we identify these projects, we acquire them, we drill them out, advance them to about a pre-feasibility stage, and then ideally we sell it to a major mining company at that point in time. That means we stay where we're in our area of specialty, and we shorten the time frame, which we think is more in line with what investors expect for a time to see that return on their project. Our first company is a good example of how we executed this plan once. With Antares, we identified the Hikura project as meeting our criteria. We acquired the project for $15 million. We put about $45 million of work into the project, and we sold it for $650 million to First Quantum in 2010. So very nice return on investment and work for our shareholders. Rick participated in that. That's how we know him and one of the reasons why he follows us as we move forward. It sounds simple. It's not a linear thing. There's some ups and downs along the way, but that gives an example. When you evaluate exploration companies, seeing previous success, and particularly previous success in the same business plan, is an important criteria to take a look at. So a little bit about how we acquired Altar. Identifying these projects is not easy, and we're cleaning the cupboards of these projects. Most of the projects that have been successful for groups that operate with our business plan are projects that were previously discovered by major mining companies, and we've reached back in our memory banks and identified these and brought them back. It's becoming much harder to identify these, and each one comes in a little bit different way. Altar was a bit unique in that it was a project that had quite a bit of work on it already. It had been previously drilled out by a junior exploration company called Peregrine Metals. They drilled the project out and sold it to Stillwater Mining Company in 2011 for $487 million US. So you'd ask, well, it looks like they've already executed the business plan on it. Stillwater was a platinum producer that acquired the project, and the project never really fit within Stillwater, and it became orphaned in Stillwater. A number of us were monitoring the project to see if there was an opportunity to perhaps acquire it when the markets turned down. And the key opportunity for us came when Sibanye purchased Stillwater. They purchased Stillwater for their platinum mine in Montana. This was marked as a non-core asset. They marked it for disposal. And we were in a good position to strike a very attractive deal on it. So our agreement is we can earn an 80% interest in the project for $15 million. We get to 60% by spending $30 million in the ground, which we've just completed. So we will soon announce that we have a 60% interest in the project. And we can go to 80% by spending an additional $25 million. And Sibanye-Stillwater started with a 19.9% equity interest. So effectively a dime on the dollar to acquire a project with a lot of extensive drilling in it already. As a consequence, we have a very tight share structure. The large fund I mentioned out of San Francisco is called Route 1. They put up most of the funding for us to acquire this project. Like us, they believe these are few and far between, and it's good to put your hands on it when you see one. So they own almost half of the company. Sibanye-Stillwater still owns a little over 16% of the company. They diluted slightly when last year South 32 came in with a 9.9 strategic placement into the company. If you're looking for due diligence on a project like us, that's some of the best due diligence you can get. A major miner like South 32 won't put that money into us without looking very closely at us. Another important thing to mention on this, the share structures on here, you can look at more details on that, but we do have coverage, particularly recent coverage launched by Desjardins, where John Agilo has put a target price of $1.65 on us. We're currently trading at about half of that. This is our share price chart over the last 3 years since the COVID bottom. In our space, actually a pretty good steady upward progression, and we've had sequential financings of 30 cents, 45 cents, 78 cents. So we're moving this steadily in the right direction as we go forward. That's very encouraging in itself, but we think there's an order of magnitude potential for increase as we move forward on the project. I mentioned that Argentina is a hotbed for exploration. We're located in the San Juan province. Argentina is a federation of states, so you need to be very careful which province you look at to explore in. Each state has a different autonomy in terms of their mining policy, very much like Canada or the US. And so you want to be in San Juan or Salta or Santa Cruz as you move forward. As I mentioned, Argentina historically has not been a mining country, but they've had the right rocks. They just haven't had conducive economic policies to allow major foreign investment, or particularly expatriation of profits from that investment. That's changing. They're very much trying to encourage us to come in, and the best way I can show it is there's a list of recent investments by major mining companies into lithium and copper projects in Argentina. And these include Rio Tinto, BHP, South 32 in our case. These companies wouldn't be making investments into Argentina if they're not comfortable things are moving in the right direction. Another way to look at that is on the right-hand side of this diagram are recent ratings out from the Fraser Institute. The Fraser Institute puts out an annual index that indicates favorability for foreign mining investment in different provinces or countries. And San Juan is ranked as the #1 most favorable destination for mining investment in all of Latin America. That's a remarkable change in a short period of time and reflective of their change in policies moving forward. The map on the right, on the left-hand side of the diagram is the San Juan province, and you'll see the Altar project highlighted in yellow or gold on the very lower left-hand side of this diagram. We're one of 5 major copper projects right along the crest of the Andes. All 5 of these projects, quite frankly, would be major mines if they were located 30 miles or 30 kilometers to the west into Chile. So they've been preserved because Argentina hasn't been a mining country, and that's about to change. It's well underway on the changes right now. As I mentioned, we already have a large resource. That resource has over 13 billion pounds of copper and nearly 4 million ounces of gold. It's important to highlight because of the extensive previous drilling, most of that is in the measured and indicated category, so a high degree of confidence in it. Large deposit by itself, but we didn't enter into the project just for this. What we saw was for potential to be very much more mineralization. This is a cross-section through the district, and like many porphyry copper districts, it's a cluster of deposits. The current resource are in the brightly colored areas on the right-hand side of the diagram. They fall into 2 zones, Altar East and Altar Central. The dashed white line is the conceptual pit that constrains our resource. We can see that those resources have mineralization open to depth, and one of the things we were encouraged about was extending drilling to depth to see if we could increase the size of the resource. We were also very excited about an area to the west on the left-hand side of this diagram called QDM Gold or radioporphyry, where we're getting some extremely encouraging results. However, those results are not included in the current resource, and they will most likely be a bulk underground mine. A lot of work to do there in the future, but as we were drilling on that, as part of our policy, we collect systematic geological or geophysical or geochemical data sets over the project. When we acquired the project, there was extensive drilling that had been completed and it was work that was very well done, but they just started on mineralization and grid drilled it out. They didn't do basic geologic mapping of the entire project or collection of systematic geochemical results, or systematic modern geophysical techniques. As a practice, that's what we do. We pride ourselves in being a technically very strong team, and we believe by collecting these data sets, it's the best way to see if there's more mineralization than simply what's evident by cropping out on the surface. We also understand that the major miners like to see those data sets, because not only can you find more mineralization with them, but you better understand what you already have. And as part of that process, as we were drilling out that area to the west last year, we received the results of the first extensive 3D geophysical survey looking at depth, and it changed the nature of the project. It really opened up the size potential, and we'll see why in these diagrams. On this diagram, we see a representation of what the project was like when we first came into it. So relatively shallow drilling to 300 to 500 meters. The long hole on this diagram was the first hole we put into the project, and that hole returned 1.4 kilometers of 0.53% copper. This is a very impressive hole in our space for drilling, and it terminated mineralization. It confirmed our hypothesis that mineralization extended to depth. But we had a challenge about, is this a carrot root beneath those two zones, or where do we start drilling? It's expensive to drill 2-kilometer holes like this everywhere, so we needed something to guide us. And that was the geophysical result that came in mid-season last year, towards the latter part of last year. And it produced this large conductivity anomaly. It's an anomaly that indicates where there are sulfide minerals, the type of minerals that typically bear copper. And instead of being two roots beneath those zones of mineralization, it turned into a large contiguous body and indicated that potentially this deposit was quite a bit larger. All of the previous drilling we had when it entered into this anomaly was well mineralized, but there was a very large portion of the anomaly that hadn't been drill tested. So last year's field campaign consisted of a series of drill holes that we dropped into this to see what we had. They're spaced at approximately a 200-meter spacing. And you can see on this, probably letters are a little fine to read, we can talk about them at the booth, but in these holes we're hitting 700 to 1,100 meters of ore-grade copper mineralization in these holes, with that mineralization sitting immediately below our previously established pit. So the potential for this project when we do the next resource upgrade for that resource to increase substantially is quite evident on this diagram. And then within each of these, there are narrower runs of higher grade mineralization as well. So this is good, consistent porphyry style mineralization and will dramatically increase the size of what was already a very large deposit. So this has us very excited. We have a few more results to report this year on the project. Keep an eye on those as they come out. And more importantly, we're taking a short 3-month break right now. We're in the South American winter. We'll be going back into the camp in September and in October beginning to drill what we anticipate will be an even much more extensive drill program for next field season. One more strong field season of drilling and we believe we'll be in a position to show the full size of the project, which allows us to move to a PEA and eventually a pre-feasibility study. So early days on this project, great time to be identifying a project like this that has a lot of potential moving forward. One way to take a look at, and this is, as investors, this is probably the most important diagram of what I'll present today on this. This is a diagram that comes right out of the initiation report by John Agilo from Desjardins when he made a recommendation to purchase our shares moving forward. And what it shows is a basket of companies that are junior companies like ourselves that have their hands on large copper deposits. And the vertical bar on this diagram shows the enterprise value or approximate market cap of a company per pound of copper in the ground. So the larger the bar is, the more value per unit of copper you have. We're on the far left-hand side of this diagram. We're currently valued at less than 1 cent per pound of copper equivalent we have in the ground. In our experience, these projects typically sell for 4 to 5 or even 6 cents per pound when majors acquire those. So our opportunity now is to advance this project through resource definition, PEA, and pre-feasibility with the potential to move from a half a penny a pound up into that 4 to 5 cent pound range. And keep in mind, there's a very good chance we're going to substantially increase the size of the deposit. So many of the projects on the right-hand side of this diagram are very good projects, but I would argue they've already been recognized and they're well valued, if not fully valued. Where you want to do is identify projects like ourselves on the left-hand side of this diagram before they really take off. And we have still a relatively short time frame to be able to get to that point. I've already really discussed the catalysts we have coming up. Soon there will be an announcement that we've earned into that initial threshold of 60% interest in the project. We have continued results to come out from last field campaign over the next 2 months. And by September, we'll be laying out what our new program will be for the year coming up. We anticipate we'll be in a position to put out a more complete resource update by late, probably Q3 2024, and ideally with a PEA by the end of 2024, which will be the first real look at the true value of this project moving forward. And just a final word, the markets are a little hesitant right now. I think there's general acceptance that copper has a tremendous amount of potential. There's a little of uncertainty in the world economy right now. I think people are waiting a little bit on when you come into copper. That's the message we hear from talking to yourselves and many others. But we get a very different message from the major copper companies that interact with us and often sign confidentiality agreements to review our project. They're very, very anxious to be acquiring projects. This is a list of recent acquisitions or mergers that have happened in the copper space in just the last 2 years. It's already on. The M&A activity cycle is already on. And predictably right now, it's mostly consolidation of districts or acquiring producing assets. When that's generally done, and particularly if we see a copper price increase, which I strongly believe we'll see by next year, it'll be very likely that assets like ourselves will start to be picked off by the major mining companies. So I couldn't be more than pleased to have our hands on a great asset in this type of a setting moving forward. So just final summary, great project, good news flow coming out on this project coming up. It's large already, but it's about to be demonstrated to be significantly larger. We're in a great location that permits us to work freely and rapidly. And most importantly of all, it's a very compelling valuation. It's a great time to identify us as a story. So if any of this resonates with you, or if you'd just like to learn more about the copper space or talk about other projects, we're here the rest of the week, and we'd be more than happy to talk with everyone. Thank you very much.
I know I said I'd play bad cop, but I've got a soft spot for exploration geologists to let them talk about their rocks. Now, before you run away, I noticed you're representing 2 companies here, and you actually touched on it in one of your slides, Regulus Resources. How does that fit into what you're doing with Aldebaran?
It's actually, we never intended to have 2 companies at one time. When we sold our first company, Antares Minerals, we spun that out into a company called Regulus. And Regulus is focusing on an incredibly interesting story called Antiquaria in northern Peru. While we were working on that, the opportunity to acquire the Altar project came up. And the best way to do it is with 2 companies. But today, in this time frame, we could talk about Aldebaran and Altar. But it's a really interesting story to hear, the Regulus story in Antiquaria. Very similar story. We have our hands on a large copper deposit, one that has significantly more gold associated with it as well in northern Peru, and is in a very similar setting as this in the sense that we're well on our way to show the resource definition, and I think it'll become a target for acquisition in the not too distant future.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you again. Beautiful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a couple more minutes before our next company, and then that will be our final presentation for the evening. And don't forget, after that, we're going to have an hour-long break, and then we will have our Living Legends panel this afternoon. And